In the early 20th century, a monumental engineering feat reshaped the destiny of Southern California. The Los Angeles Aqueduct, completed in 1930 under the direction of William Mulholland and the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, LADWP, diverted the Owens River from its natural course to supply water to the rapidly growing city of Los Angeles. This diversion, while hailed as a triumph of urban planning and infrastructure, came at a devastating cost to the Owens Valley and, most notably, to Owens Lake, a once thriving body of water that was transformed into a toxic dust bowl. Owens Lake, located approximately 220 miles north of Los Angeles, was historically a vibrant ecosystem, fed by runoff from the Sierra Nevada. The lake supported a rich array of wildlife and provided a vital resource for local communities. Before the aqueduct's construction, the lake stretched over 60 miles and reached depths of more than 30 feet. It was a remnant of a prehistoric lake system that had gradually shrunk over millennia, but still retained ecological significance. The lake's saline waters supported brine shrimp and migratory birds, and its surrounding wetlands were home to diverse flora and fauna. The diversion of the Owens River marked a turning point. By redirecting the river's flow into the aqueduct, LADWP effectively cut off the lake's primary source of water. Within a few years, Owens Lake began to shrink dramatically. By the 1920s, it had become a dry lakebed, exposing vast expanses of alkali dust and salt flats. The transformation was not merely environmental, it was existential. The lake ceased to function as a living system and became a source of airborne pollutants that would plague the region for decades. As the lake dried, the exposed playa became a major source of particulate matter, specifically PM10 particles less than 10 microns in diameter. These fine particles, easily carried by wind, posed serious health risks. Residents of the Owens Valley began to experience increased rates of respiratory illness, eye irritation, and other health problems. The dust storms were not occasional events. They were persistent and severe, making the region one of the dustiest places in the United States. Yet, despite mounting evidence of environmental degradation and public health impacts, LADWP downplayed the crisis. For decades, officials denied the severity of the problem. Reports of distributed illnesses were dismissed, and the environmental consequences were minimized. The narrative promoted by LAWP emphasized the necessity of water for Los Angeles and framed the aqueduct as a symbol of progress. The suffering of Owens Valley residents was rendered invisible in public discourse. Scientific studies conducted in the 1980s and 1990s began to quantify the extent of the damage. But these findings were often met with bureaucratic resistance and legal maneuvering. The Great Basin Unified Air Pollution Control District GBUAP, established in 1974, played a crucial role in documenting the environmental impact of the dry lake. Researchers found that Owens Lake was responsible for massive violations of federal air quality standards. PM10 emissions from the lakebed were estimated at over 60,000 tons per year by the late 1990s. These figures were not abstract, they translated into real suffering for communities in the region. Children, the elderly, and those with pre-existing conditions were especially vulnerable. Despite the mounting evidence, LADWP resisted calls for remediation. The department argued that it was not solely responsible for the dust emissions and questioned the jurisdiction of regulatory agencies. Legal battles ensued, with LADWP challenging the authority of GBUAP-CD and seeking to limit its obligations. The department maintained that it should only be held accountable for areas directly affected by its water diversions and not for the entire lakebed. This position ignored the interconnected nature of the ecosystem and the cumulative impact of decades of neglect. The turning point came in the late 1990s, when lawsuits forced LAWP to confront the consequences of its actions. In 1998, the city of Los Angeles signed a memorandum of agreement with GBUAP-CD, accepting responsibility for reducing dust emissions from Owens Lake. This agreement marked the beginning of the Owens Lake Dust Mitigation Program, a massive undertaking aimed at controlling airborne pollutants and restoring some measure of ecological balance. The program was incorporated into a formal state implementation plan, approved by the Environmental Protection Agency. In 1999, The dust mitigation efforts were unprecedented in scale and complexity. LADWP implemented a range of best available control measures BACM, including shallow flooding, managed vegetation, gravel cover, and tillage. These techniques were designed to stabilize the lakebed and prevent dust from becoming airborne. The program covered over 48 square miles and required approximately 60,000 acre-feet of water, annually ironically, a significant amount of water to control the consequences of water diversion. The cost of the program exceeded $2.5 billion, borne by LAD, while the dust mitigation program achieved notable success reducing PM10 emissions by over 99%. It also highlighted the contradictions inherent in the management of Owens Lake. The use of water to control dust raised questions about sustainability and resource allocation. The program created new wetlands and habitats for wildlife, but it also consumed vast quantities of water that could have been used elsewhere. The balancing act between environmental restoration and urban water needs remain fraught with tension. The legacy of Owens Lake is not merely environmental. It is also cultural and political. The story of the lake reflects broader patterns of institutional control, environmental injustice, and the marginalization of rural communities. The residents of Owens Valley were sacrificed for the growth of Los Angeles, their voices silenced by bureaucratic indifference and legal obfuscation. The cover-up of the environmental disaster was not a single act, but a sustained campaign of denial and deflection. The lawsuits that forced the LAWP to act were a testament to the power of grassroots advocacy and legal accountability. Community members, environmental groups, and regulatory agencies worked together to challenge the dominant narrative and demand justice. Their efforts transformed Owens Lake from a symbol of neglect into a site of restoration and resilience. Yet, the scars remain. The lake will never return to its former glory, and the health impacts on local communities cannot be undone. In recent years, the story of Owens Lake has gained renewed attention. Documentaries, academic studies, and public art installations have sought to reclaim the narrative and honor the experiences of those affected. The lake has become a case study in environmental ethics, illustrating the consequences of unchecked development and the importance of transparency. It serves as a reminder that infrastructure projects must be evaluated not only for their technical feasibility, but also for their social and ecological impact. The transformation of Owens Lake also raises questions about the future of water management in California. As climate change intensifies and water scarcity becomes more acute, the decisions made in the early 20th century continue to reverberate. The diversion of the Owens River was driven by a vision of growth and prosperity, but it lacked foresight and accountability. Today, policymakers must grapple with the legacy of those choices and seek more equitable and sustainable solutions. The Owens Lake Dust Mitigation Program, while effective in reducing emissions, is not a panacea. It represents a reactive approach to environmental management addressing symptoms rather than root causes. The program has created new habitats and improved air quality, but it has not restored the lake's original ecosystem. Moreover, the reliance on water-intensive techniques raises concerns about long-term viability. As droughts become more frequent and water resources more contested, the sustainability of the program may be called into question. The story of Owens Lake is also a cautionary tale about the limits of technological solutions. The aqueduct was a marvel of engineering, but it failed to account for ecological complexity and human impact. The dust mitigation measures are similarly impressive, but they are a response to a problem that could have been avoided. The lesson is clear. Environmental stewardship requires more than technical expertise. It demands ethical reflection, community engagement, and a commitment to justice. In reflecting on the history of Owens Lake, it is essential to center the voices of those who lived through the transformation. The residents of Owens Valley witnessed the drying of the lake, endured the dust storms, and fought for recognition. Their stories are not footnotes, they are central to understanding the true cost of progress. The environmental disaster was not an accident. It was the result of deliberate choices made without regard for those affected. The cover-up of the Owens Lake crisis was facilitated by a culture of secrecy and institutional power. LADWP, as a municipal utility, wielded significant influence and operated with limited oversight. The department's ability to shape public narratives and resist accountability underscores the need for transparency and democratic governance. The lawsuits that ended the cover-up were a victory for civil society, but they also revealed the fragility of regulatory systems. Owens Lake today is a paradox, a site of both destruction and renewal. The dust mitigation program has transformed the lakebed into a mosaic of wetlands, salt flats, and managed habitats. Birds have returned, and air quality has improved. Yet, the lake remains a symbol of environmental injustice and the consequences of unchecked ambition. Its story is a reminder that progress must be measured not only in economic terms, but also in ecological and human dimensions. The transformation of Owens Lake is not complete. Ongoing maintenance, monitoring, and adaptation are required to sustain the gains achieved. The lake's future depends on continued vigilance, community involvement, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. It is a living testament to the power of advocacy and the possibility of redemption. But it also demands that we remember the past, not to dwell in regret, but to learn, to honor, and to ensure that such a tragedy is never repeated. In the end, Owens Lake challenges us to rethink our relationship with nature, with power, and with each other. It invites us to ask difficult questions about who benefits from development, who bears the costs, and how we can build systems that honor both human and ecological integrity. The lake may be dry, but its story is a live etched into the dust, carried by the wind, and waiting to be heard.